First Immanuel's rich history of racial integration and civil rights activism, learning together about what it might mean for First Immanuel to be a congregation concerned about civil rights today. For those of you that have known me, see me in worship, or for those of you who are visiting, again, my name is Kyle Duff. I'm the seminarian from the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, who's been working with First Immanuel for this year, and kind of coordinator of the Civil Rights Then and Now project here at the team. So for those of us who were able to be with us, or who were unable to be with us in February, we held a wonderful panel of 4 longtime members, Carolyn Becker, George Manning, Betty Stanfield, and Tyrone Wallace, getting to explore some of the history of First Immanuel's, of the church, especially between 1950 and 1970, really kind of getting to better understand the history of this church involving racial integration and civil rights activism during that time period. For those that want to go see that recording of our first event, it's on our website in the About section, and then at the bottom of the Our Story page. And so in that event, we were exploring what civil rights, in a sense, looked like then. And today we're stepping out of the First Immanuel congregation in some ways, but not too terribly far, as we're going to be hearing from Miss Beverly Jones, Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Lutheran Child and Family Services, specifically talking about something that could be considered civil rights now, dismantling institutional racism within child and family services. And I say we're not going too far away from First Immanuel, because First Immanuel was actually one of the original 14 congregations, Lutheran congregations, that came together in 1873 to help establish what was then the German Evangelical Lutheran Home Association of Northern Illinois. And the Lutheran Child and Family Services of Illinois continue to be a ministry partner of First Immanuel up to this point in time. And so we're going to hear from Ms. Jones and her colleagues about the journey that they have been working on to dismantle racism and discrimination within the child and family services field, and particularly within their own institution. Just a quick logistical note before we really get underway. We also are recording today's session, just so that everyone is aware that there will be a recording today. So anyone who is on Zoom, that is recorded. And then we will hopefully get that recording posted to our website for later viewing as soon as we can after this event. And also, there is going to be a survey for some feedback that will be put in the chat as we get towards the end of our time together, as well as already available on our website right now. If you want to be able to bring that up, but we'll put that in the chat for people to access as we go on through this. And so I'm just incredibly grateful for Ms. Jones accepting our invitation to present today, and I'm anxiously awaiting our time together. But before we do, I would just love to invite Pastor Perry to open us up in prayer as we look to get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. So glad to be with you. Warm welcome, especially to Bev Jones, who is, I just think, a wonderful, wonderful treasure of our church, and look forward to hearing from her. Dear church, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for the wonderful gospel of your Son, Jesus Christ. Thank you for this very special and poignant week where with other Christians, we walk again that road to Calvary, and we behold the depth of your love, the power of sacrifice, and look forward to that incredible resurrection. Thank you, Lord, for that healing and beautiful gospel, especially in this time of challenge and anxiety and so many things happening. We thank you also for the ministry of Lutheran Child and Family Services, working very, very hard to envision and to give that vision and to realize that vision of the gospel of mercy and justice in the lives of families and children who are often stretched or hurting or in difficult circumstances, expressing the love of Jesus in wherever they may find it and express it. And we thank you, Lord, for their doing some heavy lifting and serious work at looking to dismantle systemic racism in the issues of foster care and adoption and family services. We thank you, Lord, that we can be part of this and pray that you would inspire us in our daily lives to envision a better world, a better place, your vision for your kingdom breaking in among us. Bless this time we spend together. May it be joyful and exciting and cast a vision for us of your vision for our ministry that we share. We ask all that and trust it to your care. In Jesus' name, amen, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Harry. And I would also like to start with a little bit of an introduction for Ms. Jones. I've already said her name and a few of her qualifications as we start, but a little more formally. Ms. Jones, MSA ACSW, currently serves as the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Lutheran Child and Family Services of Illinois. She has a bachelor's degree in sociology from Douglas College, Rutgers University, a master's degree in social work and postmaster certificate in social work administration from the University of Maryland. She is currently a member of the Department of Child and Family Services, Child Welfare Advisory Council, the Lutheran Services in America Children and Youth Practice Group, and the Human Rights Campaign All Children, All Families Advisory Board. Her philosophy, as described on the LCFS website, says that life is a journey full of twists and turns and bumps in the road. We are here to join hands with you in order to support and assist you in making your life's journey a smoother path. Pastor Harry has also informed me that this is likely a very modest biography for Ms. Jones, and that she has a wonderful national reputation in the child and family services field and is a great gift to us all. And so please welcome through your Zoom screens with claps or symbols or little expressions, Ms. Jones, as she shares with us. And I'm going to get that PowerPoint up here for us to view again for you, Ms. Jones.
Okay. Okay, good morning. Well, no, actually, it's afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. And Pastor Harry, it's so good to see you again. He's been a wonderful partner at our agency. So thank you, and thank you for the invitation, and thank all of you who have joined me this afternoon. I'm going to share our work that we've been doing at Lutheran Child and Family Services around dismantling systemic racism, and how we got started in a very targeted and determined way, and specifically some data to show you as well.
Ms. Jones, are you able to see, is everyone able to see the PowerPoint now?
I can see it. So
okay.
Do you want to move to the, am I moving the slide or are you?
I'm moving it for you.
Okay, if you could go. All righty, so go back one, yeah. So we call it a journey because there's, and I will say this probably as I go through the presentation, that the more you address things, the more you discover things that need to be addressed. And there's no real project plan. Everybody's journey is different. I just say you have to begin to do something. And as you start, you learn. There's setbacks, some things occur that you didn't think about or were unpredictable, but you have to be determined to keep on going. So we started with moving outside of Lutheran Child and Family Services, or the child welfare field, as we call it. It is our work contributes what to the greater society? What is it that we hope in our work we have this result? And And this is what we came up with. All children and youth in Illinois will have loving forever families. If we contribute to this population result, we feel good about our work. So we try to keep this.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Jones. I think you accidentally went on mute.
Sorry. So our goal is to contribute to this larger result, to move beyond the boundaries of our agency or the child welfare field and say, this is the greater good we are contributing to society. And this is our driver. Is what we're doing add to this result, or in some way take away from the result? And if it's neutral, then we need to re-examine our actions and say, what do we need to do differently to contribute to this result? So the beginnings, and at Lutheran Child and Family Services, there is what we call the Inclusion Council, and it's made up of staff members. We're a statewide agency at this point with multiple programs, that we wanted a group of staff at all levels of our organization representing all of our work to come together and support us in becoming a welcoming, inclusive, diverse, and equitable organization. So we call it WIDE, that we wanted to hear from a variety of perspectives around the state around this issue. When I first came, and I'm not a native of Illinois, but when I came to Lutheran Child and Family Services, and as I began to visit different offices, the lack of diversity hit, you couldn't ignore it at all. And diversity around a number of dimensions. Gender, always, some offices there were all women. A few offices might have one male, two males. So we decided we really needed to focus on becoming wide. Next slide. So the Inclusion Council came and we identified 4 areas that we wanted to have action on. One is creating a safe environment where all staff can participate in discussions, conversations about racism, and doing it in a constructive and respectful manner. Identifying what are the barriers to our organizational environment that is in which we're trying to be affirming and welcoming. Recognition that we've had conversations and events have happened in our organization, which totally went against being welcoming or affirming in any way. Heard a lot of anecdotal stories from different staff members at different parts of the organization around this. And that silence contributes to these events happening. And we are resolved to make inroads into the culture of silence. Silence is affirming to people. So those were the 4 broad areas in which we said we need to address, and address with a sense of urgency and purpose. So as we began to talk about this, both at the corporate officers level and senior leadership level, but also with staff at all staff within the organization, we got stuck in the conversation about, you're calling me a racist and I'm not. Yes, you are. No, you're not. We really got stuck there. So I happened to run into, I don't even remember how this book, The Colorblind, and I read it and said, oh, this may help us get out of this, who's racist and who's not. So we made it mandatory for all leadership within LCFS to read the book, corporate officers, directors, managers, and supervisors, and encouraged all other staff to read it as well. We had some of our board of trustees also read the book. And it really talks about why not talking about race is harmful and detrimental, and in ways in which you might tackle the issue. So we did that. As a result of that, we created an LCFS organizational commitment statement. And I think the next slide will show our statement. And you will see this commitment statement if you went into any of our offices around the state. This statement is posted in our public area for people to see our commitment to address this issue. And it's also become part of the Board of Trustees commitment statement, and it's also part of our values. We wanted to be public to anybody with whom we had contact, that this is important to us and we're going to address it. So referring back to WIDE, anybody who's being interviewed for any position within our organization, we talk about our WIDE work, why we think it's important, what do they know about, or what is their position around systemic racism. We're very clear so that people who we hire know our commitment to dismantling systemic racism, and that's who we want to come on board with us, people who have the same commitment. Every evaluation for every employee that we do yearly must include at least one action commitment that employee is making towards dismantling racism. And it can be as, I'm going to go to this training, I'm going to read this book, I'm going to have my next supervisory meeting, we're going to talk about this. It can be any number of things, but every employee is expected to have at least one commitment statement. We have developed a 5-year strategic plan, and WIDE is included in that. What is it that we see happening as a result of that, with timelines and benchmarks? And I already spoke about job interviews with prospective employees. And I want to say this sounds very systematic as I did it, but sometimes we did more than one thing at any point in time. We did what we felt was right or became available or evident. Other organizational commitments include, oops, we lost the slide.
Apologies, I'll bring it right back.
I will just say this, another thing we decided to do, there's an organization called Crossroads in Illinois, Dismantling Systemic Racism. They do quite a bit of consulting and training. We made it mandatory for anybody in a position of supervisor and above to attend a 2.5-day training that this organization offers. And it's called Dismantling Systemic Racism. Given the pandemic, because this was in-person training, that got sidelined at the moment. The good news is they have modified it, so they're starting. Actually, I think they started this month offering the 2.5-day training virtually. It's two days, not 2.5 days. So we will resume having people go. Once again, any staff person who wants to attend can attend. We absorb the cost of that. That is not a cost to the employee at all in doing that. So those are some of the things we began to do as our beginnings to set the, to get a common ground in common language, in a common framework, in a common concept. Was real important for us so that we could get off of this roller coaster of you're insulting me, you're calling me a racist, I'm not, blah, blah, blah. It also, I think, has helped that this is not just about white people not being racist at all. It's also looking at ourselves as people of color, because we've all received similar messages about race in this country and the impact of it. And for us to think, I haven't been affected by that is foolhardy. So these are the things we thought helped us do, set a framework within our organization upon which we could build.
Is this the correct slide for you now, Ms. Jones?
If you can go to the next one.
I am so sorry. My computer is just not working with me today.
Kyle, sometimes it just takes longer to advance the slides when you're on Zoom.
Okay.
So it may be working. It's just working slowly.
Slowly. So as a result of that, we then asked 2 fundamental questions of our agency as it pertains to our services to children and families. One is disparate outcomes. Are they imaginary or real? Are there real differences between results when you compare white children versus children of color? How real is that or not? And so we needed to look at our own data around that to get those answers. And if there is disparity, if we find there is disparity, what are we going to do about it? Well, yes, we found in our organization mirrored all the state of Illinois, all the agencies, including the Department of Children and Family Services. There are severe disparities. It's also true nationally. So the next slide, you'll begin to see some data. So in September 2018, we had 4% of African-American children achieving permanency. Now that's inside language. And by permanency, it means having a forever family. So only 4% of our youth who are African American had a forever family at the end of there. So we set a very modest goal, not knowing. So we did a modest goal and said, well, that's not good. We'll increase it by 5%, which means 9% of African American children will achieve permanency. So what you see is the increase over the 4%. So in March of 19, we were at 10% increase, which meant we went up by 6%. 14, we increased by 4%. So by October 2020, we had a 47% increase, or a 43% over the 4% in terms of African American youth having a forever family. And that is huge. I think that's huge. We also said it takes the length of time once a child comes into foster care. How long does it take the system to get them either back home with their parents or adopted? What we call permanency. What in my language is much better is a forever family. And the time youth of color were staying was abominable. It's also true for white children, but it's even longer for Black children, much longer for Black children. So you can see that we decreased the number of days it took us for them to have a forever family. These things still go on, and we still measure these. So, like I said, it's a journey. We still have a long way to go, and that's our work going forward. So, next slide. The next slide is similar to what we did for African American children at Lutheran Child and Family Services. In 3 of our sites, we serve a number of Latinx children and families. And we looked at those as well. Were there disparities in outcomes? And the answer was yes. So we began to work on those. And like when we first got started, when we first got started, you can see no Latinx child got a forever family. By October 2020, we had increased that by 20%. The length of time it took was look at the decrease. Before looking at this in a real concentrated and focused way, 1,545 days children, a Latinx child would stay in care before they had a forever family. We decreased it to 235. So, and we continue to track that data. I convene a group of leaders every 6 weeks where we check our data. What are we doing? Are we maintaining it? How well are we doing? So we've added one of the things we discovered in looking at forever families, children of color, well, as an organization as a whole, about 70% of children were, once again, this is our language in child welfare world, were reunified with their birth parents. It's a little higher for children of color, but it's about the same. So we said, any child who is reunified with their parents, our goal, our population is that they will remain with them forever, that they don't ever have to come back into care. And that's what we're tracking now, in addition to the other things I just talked to you about. Because we did that because it goes back to our population result in our contribution to that. So from September 2018 to October, it can't be October 20, it's 2020, not 2021. 61% of the permanencies were what we called reunification. A third was adoption, and 6% is guardianship. And those by and far are relatives who are caring for their kin and seek legal guardianship as opposed to adoption. And it's a legal process, and they so a grandmother, it's like I'm not, that's my grandchild, it doesn't make sense to me to adopt, but they will get legal guardianship of their grandchildren. And this is just more data for you in terms of what we track. So 93% of the children who have gone home or gone back to their birth parents continue to be at home. And while we can celebrate that, we're looking at, well, what happened that the 7% had to come back into care? Because our goal is 100% of children who get reunified stay with their parents and never have to come back into care. That's what when I talk about the more you do, the more you uncover and the more things you discover you need to look at. So we are now in discussions about how we want to figure out in the 7% who had to come back into care. Why did they come back into care? How do we address that so we get to the 100%? So in all of this, I say, our discussion is, well, what made the difference? What made the difference? And what are we doing differently than we were doing before to get these results? Because this has not been a traditional research project. We jumped in and said we need to address it. So we've been having meetings with supervisors and around, well, what are you doing differently? What's changing? And much to my surprise, the number one thing that came up is we had no idea this is how poorly we perform with families of color. So giving us the data, and what you've seen is our data as an agency as a whole. Every location gets their own data. So they get how the agency as a whole is doing. But if I am working in our Springfield office, I also get my Springfield data to see how well I'm doing. And supervisors said that was an eye-opening for them. They had no idea. I had no idea, because we had some offices where a few offices where no children of color left foster care or went home. So data mattered, and presenting it to people, and they didn't feel like it was a shaming or you're racist. It was educational and eye-opening. And there's an intentionality about our work and how we do it that we didn't have before. There are meetings. We've done what we call practice forums about how we do our work. How do we engage our families? One of the things that has changed dramatically is if parents are not living together, we tended to work exclusively with the moms, even though the dad may be visiting, paying child support. He was an afterthought. Dads are very, very much involved as well around how does your child have a forever family. So the last time I saw the data, I think about a third of our reunifications have been with dads. So, and staff tease me because I always say this, children have two parents. They may live permanently with one, but there's another parent who, whether that child lives with them or not, has a role to play. And our job is to make sure that children know they have two parents and are involved in their work. I think the other thing, and I'm not going to go because a lot of this strong advocacy by our staff, supervisors in particular, talked a great deal about feeling supported and encouraged around being an advocate for parents, particularly with our court system, with judges. Staff rarely, I shouldn't say rarely, were uncomfortable if they disagreed with what a judge was saying. They have figured out how to write court reports and presenting parents from a strengths-based perspective and being their cheerleader with other systems we deal with. Language matters, and we've learned to celebrate any progress at all, no matter how small, how little, is to embrace it and share it with everybody in our organization as a way of saying, yeah, this is hard, but look at what we're doing and the changes we're making. So what have we learned from all of this? And I already said, the more you do, the more you need to do. And we have discovered there are things we can do within our organization that we have control over, and that's important. But we also need to work with other systems to get real long-lasting change. This is my pet peeve. And once again, this is inside our work. We tend to write off adolescents and write off in the sense that they really need a family. There's something that's called independent living in our work, which says, and that's listed as a permanency goal. And I'm a mom and a grandmom at this point. And I can trust you, my daughter is nowhere by independent at all. And I'm not even sure what that means, what we're looking to achieve. But we need to really zero in. If we want every child to have a loving forever family, we cannot say, well, this child is too old to be adopted or returned home, or it really doesn't matter. language matters. I often ask people, you're going to meet a family for the first time. How do you decide how do you introduce yourself, and how do you determine how you're going to address them? Or am I Mrs. Jones, but Dad, you're Kyle? And I just assume that that's okay. Think about how you introduce yourself. How do you talk about the work you want to do with them? Is it you need to do 1, 2, 3, and 4? Or is there a real dialogue about, tell me about how this happened. Let me try to understand what happened that it required your child to come into care, and let's figure out together how that child can come back and live with you. And then be prepared. We still have our naysayers within our organization, but we try to stay focused and embrace all of us who embrace the goal of becoming an anti-racist organization. Self-care is important. You have to stay in touch with what triggers you to get angry, upset, sad, insulted, offended, really do self-care. And there is a difference between equality and equity. And that little picture says it all for me. We're looking for equity. And then clearly, as an agency, we've looked at the impact or the intersectionality between race and what we call SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. We are part of All Children, All Families, and we achieved the innovator designation based on our policies and practice embracing this population as well in our work. So I always say to dismantle systemic racism requires all of us coming together and working together. And I'm really glad to have this time with you guys to talk about this, around this issue, because I think regardless of faith plays an important part in people's lives. So we need everybody to say this is an issue in our country and we're ready to dive deep and do the hard work, recognizing there are no quick, easy answers to this issue. And Kyle, I think that's it. So.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Jones. If everyone wants to maybe give a little round of applause or thanks for everything that you were able to share with us. That was wonderful. I just want to say I was personally really impacted by the results when you're talking about with the Latinx families, that how drastically, as soon as you began really intentionally focusing on those statistics and realize that this is a substantial issue that's happening, and then you change your organization's approach. Oh my, what a drastic turnaround for those families, for those individuals, for what's happening in the organization. So I was just saying that was a really impactful moment for me in your sharing. And now for everyone involved, a couple of us from the Civil Rights Then and Now planning team are going to ask a few specific questions to Ms. Jones, and then we're going to open it up for everyone to be able to ask questions and answers in the remaining time that we have together. And so I'm going to ask the first question. And you started, kind of mentioned it as you began. But really, can you give us a better framing about really what was the root, what was the turning point within your organization that you said, now, like, we're going to begin this process. We need to begin this process. Where did that thrust kind of come from, and how did you build up enough momentum to really make this a priority for your organization, rather than doing what you were continuing to do before?
I think that there had been several rather ugly incidents that had occurred within our organization, staff member to staff member or staff members to staff members. And people had been quiet about those things. And this is where the Inclusion Council played a role. Hearing about those, bringing them to the attention, and there wasn't one single incident, but I'm very vocal. As a leader, I was appalled at what had happened, and in talking to the people who were involved, they thought that they needed to be silent. No one had ever told them to be silent, but somehow they got the message was, don't rock the boat, just suck it up and leave it at that. And so, and by that time I was a corporate officer and just said, this is not good. Not only were the incidents ugly, but the fact that people felt they had to be quiet about what had occurred was equally disturbing.
She's on the podium.
Some strong commitment of a few members, including yourself, to really stand up and say, no, this is not something that can continue to exist as an organization. We need to focus on it.
Right.
That's wonderful, and thank you for to have the courage and tenacity to step up and to voice that difference that needed to be made for the organization. I'm going to turn it over to another member of our Civil Rights Then and Now planning team. I'm Josh Dunlop, who's going to ask a question as well, right from the screen. So I'm going to scooch over. He's going to ask a question.
Thank you so much for sharing. And one of the things I guess I'm getting more aware of is to not make assumptions. So there's a question I want to ask, but I think I should preface the actual question of, why do you think it's important for faith-based organizations like churches, and especially Lutherans, to consider doing this type of work? But I want to ask that, but first I think we should ask, aren't there already public institutions taking care of this? Maybe state, federal, local things doing similar work?
Some are, some aren't. But it's everybody's job. It's not, and I think so too often sometimes we think, well, that's so-and-so's business and they'll take care of it. I think, if we just think about the last year, the pandemic, right, going on, what communities have been hurt the most, impacted the most, or in terms of the worst outcomes? Availability and accessibility to the vaccinations. And we just all can't just say, well, that's public health. That's their job. We all have to look at ourselves and say, what can I do? or how can my organization help alleviate the issues? So I think we all own it because we all are living it.
I guess that kind of does answer both questions to a degree about why it's important for us to do it and whether or not there are state agencies already in place to do it. I guess,
Well, I think in terms of that, I do think as we've done this work, we've learned other private agencies have done this. But I think at least in the child welfare world, the department has made this a priority. I'm co-chairing the Child Welfare Advisory Committee around this, and race equity is a priority, and we're developing a plan of action and what that will look like. But everybody owns that. And one of the important things to me on that committee is that we have parents sitting on the committee, people who have gone through this experience, lived through it, to hear their perception of what has happened. So I think there's your own work you can do, and then joining with others to have a greater impact, particularly as you begin to do things and you learn things, and being able to share it. So for me, it doesn't matter who starts it. It's everybody's business.
Okay, so even if there are organizations that may already do similar work, we shouldn't just assume, well, it's their job, let them do it, because sometimes it's possible that sometimes we do have to accept some responsibilities. Sometimes they get overloaded. Sometimes their backlogs can be terribly long or something. So I guess when we take some more responsibility ourselves, I guess what I'm hearing is we can help mitigate, long lines at, maybe government organizations, and we can also help prioritize things like being anti-racist and taking on things that are important to the organization, and allowing the families to potentially use what if they are in line with whatever our core beliefs are, at least having another available option to go through.
Right, and I think as a person of faith, I'm not Lutheran, but as a person of faith, I think that's what God calls for us to do, is to do this. You see an injustice, you speak up, you do something about it. You just don't. That's what we're required to do. Be it small or large, does it get noticed, not noticed? It is our responsibility as a person of faith.
Thank you so much. That definitely spoke to me.
Another question from the panel, and then we'll open up to the whole group.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Paulette Rogers. In terms of framing this in the context of the church or the congregation, what would you see as the similarities or the differences between social services sphere and the congregation? So how do we balance this in the congregation's
I think as I think about it, one of the things that always strikes me a lot is that some of the most segregated places are churches. Which is odd to me, and it still seems to be very much the same. So I think but I also think that congregations are not only responsible for the people who are members of that congregation, but also to deliver inspiration, help, hope to their communities in which they're located, right? And in doing that, the issue of racism has to be thought about and talked about and acted on, so that the church is far more its sphere of influence is more than the members of a particular congregation. You know, I'll tell us, and I was little there when this happened, but my church that I went to at the time, children did not go to we had children's church downstairs while the adults were upstairs. And we were all, and I was about 5 or 6, and we were all excited because we got to go to what we called the big people's church that Sunday. And we were at the service, and needless to say, we were getting fidgety and ready for it to be over. Our Reverend MacIver, our minister, was doing the benediction. When a man came into the service, and he really smelled badly, he looked badly, and Reverend MacIver stopped service and immediately addressed the needs of this gentleman. And me, along with myself, our little playmates, we were holding our nose because he smelled so badly, blah, blah, blah. And I remember that specifically because our pastor met with us in talking about church and what it meant in service. And service was not just the people who came to church every Sunday, but this man was in need, and we were giggling and tired and wanted to leave. It was a real important lesson for me at that time. So for me, that's the answer, if that's helpful.
That really helps. Thank you.
And then I just want to now open it up to other questions from the audience. I did see one from Pastor Harry in the chat, and you feel free, those around, to either type it in the chat or mute yourself. We've got about 10 more minutes, if that's still okay for Ms. Jones, for a few more questions. Pastor Harry, would you like to voice yours, or would you want me to raise it up for you?
Can you hear me? I'll voice it. That good? What I had typed with typos in it into the chat was, would it be helpful to speak to the difference between color cognizant and color blind? That I think, you know, I don't know how many of us gathered here, but I grew up being taught that, you know, all people were the same. You are to be color blind. And I have learned and grown partially through my knowledge of attending workshops with Lutheran Child and Family, that we need to address being color cognizant. And I think I would love to hear you and share and comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I always, I've thought a lot about that, because people still raise that up for me. And I often ask, well, when you say you don't see color, this is how I receive it. This is how I hear that my being African-American has no value to you. You are dismissing a core part of who I am by telling me that. So what are you really, and of course that's not their intent. It's like, so when you say that, and what do you mean you don't see color? I clearly see Pastor Harry. If somebody asked me to describe Pastor Harry, I would say, well, he's white, he's a man, you know. So when you say you're not seeing color, what is it that you really are trying to convey to me? Because that gets lost on me. I don't understand it. I see it as diminishing something that's very important to me. And it's not the totality of who I am, but what are you really trying to, and everybody's not the same. What I may require is may be very different than what so-and-so may have. So what is it that you really are trying to, I think you need to think about, what is it that you want me to know about you that helps me be okay with that? Because I immediately get offended. if that makes any sense. And it also gives permission for us to continue to do the same things we're doing now that leads to systemic racism by ignoring, like, well, we just don't ever have to talk about it. So it's destructive, I think. I think it's destructive and it's not helpful, and it doesn't help us do any change.
If I could do a follow-up, thank you. And I know that what I have been learning across my adult life, and especially my recent adult life, is to be cognizant where people come from and how what's being received by what I'm saying. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Pastor Harry. I believe Miss Sylvia Ross has another question for us.
Good afternoon, Ms. Jones. Thank you so much for your eye-opening presentation.
Thank you.
You started out your slide presentation with a booklet called The Colorblind. Is that something that is used specifically by LCFS, or can it be used by other organizations? And do you think it would be beneficial for other organizations?
I think it's, and actually we just had the two authors come and talk to our all staff meeting, which was virtual. I think it's helpful. The book definitely talks about work and child welfare, and they had permission to really have access to the operations of a particular agency in a different state. But I think in reading it, you can apply it to any institution. It was helpful to us because it was the work we do. But the whole and they use it a lot at universities and colleges in graduate programs and stuff. But I think anybody could, and it's a really eye-opener book, the whole issue about colorblind versus color cognizance and how that plays out in organizations. I think it could be useful to everybody. It was interesting to those of us in child welfare because it was our business. But I think I've had other people read the book who enjoyed it as much and took lessons from it based on that as well. So while it really does zero in on child welfare, they don't really get into the weeds necessarily of the work so that people could not infer or learn from the points and lessons they were trying to convey.
Thank you. I would like to get a copy if it's possible. I think it would be beneficial for all of us to read, because if this past year hasn't taught us anything else, people are definitely wanting to address racism. You know, I think we all walk around, especially people who are people of faith, we all walk around thinking, we're not racist. We accept everybody. But even with Pastor making that statement about, you know, I don't see color. I don't think when people say that they mean to be offensive, but I think then it's our job, and people are saying that it's your job to speak about that. You talked about the silence, and that's what happens. You know, we just take things for granted that when we say something like that, people will receive it like we are giving it, like we don't really care what color you are. We look at the person, but you can use your words and say that. I look at you as a person. I'm interested in where you came from. I'm interested in your thoughts. I'm interested in how you feel about me. But we don't have that conversation. we've got all these means of communication in the 20th century, but we do not communicate. So my second question to you is, when you are evaluating families for placement of a child, is race a criteria?
No, but the conversation about particularly is about particularly if you're placing a child of one race with a family of a different race. There's lots of conversation, inquiry about that. It does, so we don't limit, we don't only do same race placements, but anybody who comes forward and is opening to parenting a child of a different race, or there's lots of conversation and work about that.
Thank you very much.
And some families, based on that, decide, well, you know, I thought I was doing the right thing, but I don't think that's I don't think that's good for us to do now, but it's something. So we have a number of children who are placed with foster parents of a different race, not a majority, but there's a significant number in our adoption program. We have that, but it's something that there are numerous conversations about.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
We are getting about the end of our time. Does anyone have a very pressing question that we would need really to answer just today? Ms. Jones. She is full of wisdom and has been helping us really dive into the subject here for our church. Well, there's no, I'm not seeing an emergent question. Oh, Pastor Harry raised a hand. He has the emerging question. Go ahead.
The clergy or the talker here, whatever. I just, Beverly, I'm going to call you by your first name because I just feel.
Oh, please do.
I've encouraged our congregation so much to be supportive and involved with Lutheran Child and Family, and wanted them to, because I feel that it's a larger ministry that we're a part of, and a lot of our folks don't even know about. What if you took 30 seconds or a minute and just told us all the different things you do, or the scale of the number of children that are involved in foster care and adoptions? Because I think our folks here probably don't realize all the good work that you guys are doing.
So Lutheran Child and Family Services has been around for a long time. At the moment, we're a statewide agency so we offer a number of services. And I'll start with a camp, because most people don't even realize we have a camp in Waterloo. Didn't have camp like we normally did given the pandemic, but it's they offer both a day camp and overnight camp. But we have our adoption program. We have foster care. In foster care, in the course of a year, we serve about 2,800 children around the state. We have what we call intact family services, where the determination has been made by the state that something occurred with the child, but not at the point of such risk that the child had to come into foster care, but the family needs services. So we do intact family services. There's what we call extended family support services, and that is relatives who are caring for kin who need extra support about that and how to get guardianship of a child if that's appropriate. We have that. We have our own counseling department. So the children and families who may need counseling, we have our own staff to do that. We also have an emergency shelter in the southern part of the state in Mount Vernon called Southern 30 Adolescent Center, which is an emergency shelter for boys 10 and over who are either coming into care or have been in care and have no other place for them to go at the moment. So we serve those young people as well. That's us. We have a regenerations program, which is really in the Chicago area serving, and we were the first organization to offer to provide that service. And it serves young people 12 and older who are involved not only being in foster care, but also involved with the juvenile justice and criminal justice system. And overwhelmingly, those young people are youth of color. Very rarely do you see a white young person in that program. They're either African American or Latinx. And we're really proud of that. First of all, we were being the first agency to step up and say, we'll take this on. So that's in Cook County. And that's us, I think, as I'm going through the list of things. And we're always looking for volunteers, whether it's a day or a moment or something you like to do, being a foster parent. We would love for people to do that. But we have a volunteer, and I can send this. We have a volunteer coordinator at this point, if you want to, that you can reach to look at all the possibilities we have. We're not doing much because our offices, most of us are working remotely during this pandemic. And so, but we need people, or if you know community people or neighbors who like to do something, we could, more hands on deck, the better children and families are. It is rare that I don't know any family, any parent who has a child who says, oh, I can't wait to get involved with the child welfare system. And people need supports and encouragement. And many of them have lost faith in themselves, and that's always sad to see and be a part of. So part of our job is getting people to believe in themselves and restore their faith.
Thank you. First of all, for what you just reported, all of the amazing work that Lutheran Child and Family Services does for children and families all over our state. So thank you and your organization for that. And thank you for your work in anti-racism and what you are doing to make your organization and the whole child welfare system a safe and equitable place for all people. So I just want to say once again, a huge thank you from me. If others want to show thanks and gratitude for Ms. Jones and everything that she said today and was able to share with us for her time with us today. I am very, very grateful for everything that you shared with us, for being willing to share with our congregation today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And my apologies for technical issues at the beginning. If we get together again, I hope we'll have a straight out. And then just a couple quick notes for everyone else that I already put in the chat here, but it's also on the website, that if you are able to provide us any feedback on this event, there's just a quick Google form, some questions, both about how this event goes and also your interest in anti-racism work, even here at this church, suggestions that you have, conversations that we need to be having. There's space on that form to provide some input there. And also I put in the chat, we do have our next Civil Rights Then and Now event already set for April. It will be April 25th. And we're going to be hearing from two different churches here in Chicago on the north side. Both St. Luke's Logan Square and Holy Trinity Lutheran Church have established anti-racism ministry that they operate in coordination with the ELCA Metro Chicago Synod. And so on April 25th, we're going to be joined by representatives from both of those churches and their anti-racism teams to share about moving even more into a congregational setting. What does this work look like? And maybe we'll provide some more food for thought for First Immanuel as we, as either individuals or as an entire congregational community, consider the work of anti-racism moving forward. Just a big thanks for everyone for staying here. A big thanks to my team, the Romans 8 team, Harrison Gassa, Josh Dunlap, Paulette Rogers Gumbis, Carol Emmons, and all who helped make this event possible. So I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a blessed Holy Week as we continue on our way. So with that, please go in peace. Thanks so much.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, everyone. It was great.
Thank you, thank you.
It was
Appreciate it.
wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you very much also from me. Thank you.
Hey, Dennis. Hey, Betty.